Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Friday. We picked the worst time to go live. I think we've got a whole World Cup and it's Thanksgiving, but the process does not end. It's very important not to get deal fatigue. It's a big phenomenon in any merger and acquisition activity or any type of big deal. So obviously we are approximately, what is it now, about 6 months, approaching 6 months into this whole Celsius craziness. Still no reorganization plan. The bidding process has started. And today we're going to be discussing exiting Chapter 11. We've got a lot of new people to the painful Chapter 11 party. Buckle up, it's a crazy ride. But I'm going to try and share with you how we can save a lot of time and try and get to the most efficient outcome and efficient result based upon everything that we've been through. So I've created a bit of a presentation today on the different types of outcomes, the different players, and I'm very excited to present to you some new technology to make this whole process more efficient so we can argue less on Twitter and just put our money where our mouth is and get on with the process. We're currently using this live at the moment. So we'll do a quick demo and afterwards, as always, I'll jump over to Twitter Spaces where we can do about an hour of AMA, jump up, anyone that's watched these videos, and you can ask your questions. And as always, ask the tough questions, I'll answer them for you as well. Okay, so I'm gonna move over to a slide share and a presentation quickly now. I've also got an account open to do some demos. So hopefully you can see the full screen. Today's gonna be all about exiting Chapter 11. We're going to take this up to approximately 30 minutes of content, and then we'll also make sure we get the demo in and try and finish on time this time. Okay, so firstly, this is not legal advice, this is not investment advice, this is not tax advice. You do really need your own professional advisors, whether you're involved in the bidding process, putting together ad hoc groups, or just representing yourself as an individual. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to get together throughout the Chapter 11 process and get more efficient with that, but you cannot treat any of this as legal investment or tax advice. This is just educational purposes based upon experience and life processes we are learning from in real time. So if you're not familiar with Banktothefuture, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Banktothefuture.com. I'm involved in a Chapter 11 myself because that top left company, Celsius, I invested in, and I invested in it through Banktothefuture, where we pulled together investors that want to invest in the equity of private companies. Celsius was one of our bad investments, unfortunately, because once it goes into bankruptcy, then the equity tends to become worthless. So and it moves over to creditors and debtors, which is those that they owe money to. But I'm also the 21st largest creditor as an individual, as well as other entities that we've invested through using it as a customer. We were also involved in raising finance for many of the largest companies in Bitcoin and crypto. So this all comes vast experience. A few that I'll share with you before we jump into the main content. When Mt. Gox went bust and lost 850,000 Bitcoins way back in the day, I think it was 13, 14, then one of the companies that I invested in called Kraken was the company that really put together all the tools and resources in order to make it more efficient for people to pull their funds together and actually gain access to their claims through Kraken as a result of Mt. Gox. Still not settled to this day, but Kraken started to put together the technology, much like Banktothefuture is today, in order to facilitate making these processes easier as kind of a service to the community. We were also involved in putting together a recovery plan for the Bitfinex 119,000 Bitcoin hack, which led to the world's first security token. We used financial innovation in order to solve it. And rather than investors getting 30 cents on the dollar, those that stayed the course ended up getting $16 on the dollar, plus a bunch of dividends and entitlement to the coins that were eventually and are currently being retrieved by the Department of Justice if they ever get transferred. We were also involved in pooling together some funding to plug a tether hole as a result of them using a bank account that was seized by governments for fraudulent reasons, nothing to do with Tether, but to do with the bank account that they were using, creating a hole in which case they had to lend some money between Tether and Bitfinex and fill the hole, and a token was used in order to put together a recovery plan to get that back on track. And now Celsius, as the 21st largest creditor and involved in the bidding process in order to try and get all of the coins owned by creditors in custody and any securities or investments that were made owned by the creditors. Each one of these was slightly different, but we've learned a lot from all of them over the year, and I'm going to try and shortcut it for those of you that are new to Chapter 11, so you can understand how to exit Chapter 11. So the very first thing to understand before we do the technology demo is who are the different players involved in this Chapter 11 process. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be assigned a judge, and that judge is really going to make rulings on all the key decisions throughout the process. For Celsius, we've been doing this for about 5 months. And one of the key things that needed to be ascertained is who actually owns the crypto. Because Celsius very evilly said in their terms and conditions that when you deposit funds with Celsius, we own them and you're lending them to us and we can use them as we choose. They went out and played a legal hedge fund with our money, and we have to fight in order to gain back ownership of those funds. They also went out and invested a bunch of stuff. And so we have to fight in order to make sure that those securities and shares belong to us and we get all the benefit from it. And the judge is going to be the one that makes those rulings. And it's going to be done through a number of different players and processes. The next one is the debtor. So when it refers to the debtor, you're talking about the company that put themselves in Chapter 11. Why did they go into Chapter 11? To protect themselves from all the lawsuits that's coming through and try and come out the other side with something and all of the lawsuits removed. There's a number of ways of doing that, and I'll go through that right now. Essentially, that is the example Celsius, Voyager, and FTX, with more to follow, it appears, as a result of the contagion in our industry. The third player is the US trustee. So they're a department of the Department of Justice, the DOJ, that represents the legality of everything, and they can object to some of the processes. So if the debtor ends up trying to do things, the US trustee can object, and the judge can make a ruling based upon the debtor saying their thing and the US trustee. And they also are sometimes appointed when there's illegal activities or things that potentially need deep investigations. So in the Celsius case, the examiner was appointed in order to investigate whether the custody service and the earn service were managed correctly. They released a report saying no, and also market manipulation and misrepresentations, and also whether the tax was paid correctly. So all of these are being investigated in the case of Celsius by the US trustee through an examination that they appoint, an examiner. The next player, the fourth player, is the unsecured creditor committee. So anybody can apply if any of these bankrupt companies or insolvent companies in Chapter 11 owe you money, then the US trustee will appoint about 7 of you to join an unsecured creditor committee. They don't pay you, but you need to give significant time in order to try and vote and put forward the best results for creditors and represent creditors' interest. You'll also be given a budget from the debtor's funds. So the debtor will have some funds, and you can hire legal counsel, you can hire accountants, advisors, auditors, investigators, and those professionals will represent you as the unsecured creditor committee, and your job is to represent creditors and fight against the debtors or the US trustee in trying to get the right decisions from the judge as it goes through the case. And then finally, you have ad hoc groups, which is groups of creditors or special interest groups that will get together and try and pull together their resources, hire legal counsel, form an ad hoc group, and represent a particular area by filing motions and putting cases in front of the judge in order to represent your interests. So in the Celsius case, we had people that were disgruntled by their loans. We had an ad hoc group for loans. We had an ad hoc group for custody that were trying to make sure that they get the property rights represented. There were ad hoc groups set up for like equity holders and various other things. So these are the different players, and all of them efficiently will be used in the process and or inefficiently. Then there happens to be 4 processes. So once you get into this, there's 4 processes. The first is if it's complete fraud or a Ponzi scheme, it goes straight into Chapter 7 liquidation. I've been told, I haven't been through one of these, but that takes a couple of years, depending on the complexity of the case, whereby a US trustee just simply comes in and liquidates all the assets and try and recovers as much dollars for you. Or it can go into a Chapter 11 where they try and do an examination, unfold the process, and then eventually a US trustee takes over and does a Chapter 11 liquidation, where essentially it's the same thing, but rather than going straight to liquidation, it does it through the process. The problem with a liquidation is that you get no vote in the process, so it will be done for you, done to you. So sometimes it's very favorable to avoid that process, especially if the assets are being sold in a very distressed market. Many people would argue that this is one of the most distressed market in the crypto space. So liquidating assets is probably as bad as time as it could be 2 years prior to the halving, heading into Christmas and the Thanksgiving period, during one of the worst controversies in our sector that has led to lots and lots of bankruptcies in our industry. So that's the first process. The second is what's called a cash bid auction. That is where soon after the process starts, the judge will be pushing and the debtor will be pushing in order to try and sell some of those assets. They will create a data room and they'll look for qualifying people that are qualified enough or regulated enough, if regulations are involved, in order to bid on those assets and take over the relationship. So in the case of a broker-dealer or a bank, you wouldn't normally go into Chapter 11. You'd have something called a SEPA liquidation, which is essentially a bunch of brokers or banks would say, we'll take over the relationships, and then you go off and liquidate the assets. Because many of these companies didn't follow regulations, they're in that process where they put together a bid and an auction, and the investment bank will come along and put together a data room and put together an auction to try and find suitable people to bid on those assets. The problem with that is if somebody is very favored towards a cash bid, and obviously predators come along and they want to buy your assets for pennies on the dollars, and the investment banks are very favorable towards cash bids, and so often you don't get to maximize the value of those assets. And if they go into an auction and give a cash bid, you get no vote in the process either. The third process is what's known as an auction plus a reorganization. This famously happened with Voyager, where by FTX, and FTX came along and said there's a bunch of fraudulent loans that we need to cover up. So we're going to buy an auction and put together a bid, but we're also going to put together a bit of a reorganization plan where we sell off some of your crypto, dollarize the value, wipe out some of the debt, and just really reorganize it slightly, take out the platform. When this happens, you do get to vote on the process, but then obviously FTX became a bad actor and a non-credit-worthy bidder throughout the auction process, and so Voyager has to start the process again. Binance confirmed that they're bidding on that as well. And if we've got time, I'll also like to discuss a very productive meeting that we had, the Banktothefuture team and the Binance team today. We'll share more details on that as we progress. But anyway, third process. The fourth process is essentially what's called a standalone reorganization. And this is where the company is not involved in, like illegally operating a business or something, or, it can really reorganize itself. Imagine if a company like Digital Currency Group went into Chapter 11. They've got they may have a hole, and they may need to fill that hole, but they've got lots and lots of assets. They've got the regulations sorted. They just need some time to reorganize themselves, and then they do what's known as a standalone reorganization. So rather than just going through the auction process and finding someone else to take over, they put together a fully comprehensive plan, and then creditors vote on that plan. And what I have noticed is that during the beginning phase, the reorganization plan can only be proposed by the debtor, so the creditor, the debtor initially. They have an exclusivity period and they always extend it. That tends to happen. And during that time, no one else can publicly solicit a plan. And so it can be very frustrating, as it was in the Celsius case, where everyone wanted us to put forward a plan. We had to share a bunch of ideas, which we did, but you can't put forward a plan, and only the debtor can exclusively do that. But you will get to vote on those processes. So really, you want to drive it into something that you can vote upon. Otherwise, the decision will be made for you. The first two, the decision will be made for you. The second two, you get to vote. There's two ways really to recover. That you've got a bunch of cash, which in the case of crypto companies is you have fiat at a bank, and then you have a bunch of coins in crypto. And then you have securities. So often there's assets that you can benefit from. And that could be equity, or it could be some kind of debt that's owed, or it could be even a legal claim. Where what we did during the Bitfinex reorganization is everybody got their cash that was left and there was a shortfall. And then we securitized through a security token the debt. It was able to be converted into shares in the company, or they could just sit on the coin. When you exchange it for the asset or the security, you give up some of those legal claims, and those legal claims can go through. So there's only two real ways of recovering your funds, which is cash and securities. The real important part of this process that we've learned after such a long time is that many of the processes are centered around the company, the debtor, trying to claim that the cash and the coins are theirs, and therefore they should have the right to spend them. Or the securities are theirs, and we need to fight in order to get those securities issued to you, rather than them trying to do it. Because what we're seeing in the Celsius case, for example, is they're forcing people. So those companies, for example, Celsius invested in a Bitcoin mining operation. Based upon public information, it's losing about $15 million a month. And in order to really put all the assets to work that they purchase, we estimate, based on public information, about 200 million investment. They don't have that money, and so they're applying to the court in order to sell our money so that we can be forced to invest in them. And so really, if you could just move those securities over, those shares in the company over to the creditors, give the coins back to creditors, then essentially they could use technology, which we're working on, in order to say, well, I'd be willing to invest my coins in that mining operation, or I don't want to invest my coins in that mining operation, so don't force me. So really, those are the two ways to recover, and you've got to be careful of the companies trying to take your coins or trying to force you to invest in more securities and more reorganization plans. You've got to be careful of those. So it really comes down to the ownership conversation. In Celsius, we had to fight for ownership, and we're still fighting right now. The reason for that is because many of these companies don't do custody correctly. Custody is where you own the coins, and it's really important distinction. So in the case of a company that goes bankrupt, if it's genuinely done as custody, they're segregated away from it. So the coins are held in your name and they're not involved in the bankruptcy proceedings. So it's really important to see that custody is done properly in the future for any of these cases as well. You also have operational funds, which is where the company has some money and they can spend that money on all the lawyers and the UCC and all the different professionals. And you also have the involuntary investment. This is the reorg. So if, for example, the reorganization requires additional investment, then in the Celsius case, as we're seeing, client funds are being applied for in the court to sell off our Bitcoin, sell off our stable coins, and involuntarily invest it in their company so that they can restart the company and force us to invest in it. So ownership becomes a really important part of it. The key fight here is to make sure that all the coins are owned for you, and there's a mechanism for distributing any equity or debt or claims or securities to you, which is the process that we worked on in previous cases and we're fighting for in this case. So how do you maximize Chapter 11? You maximize a Chapter 11 by keeping all of the crypto in custody and ensuring that those funds are not spent on lawyers and professionals and reorganizations, and make sure that they are for you and for you only. Once you've got them in custody, if you can get to that place, if we could start the whole process again, we would have focused on ensuring that the coins are ours. It's taken us all this time to get the judge to rule on that, and he still hasn't ruled on it. Then you can withdraw them, the crypto. So, once you've got your funds back as fast as possible, if it's held in custody, the company should have no problem with you withdrawing them into self-custody and you walking away with your coins. The problem comes is when they want to keep your coins, and then they claim that those coins are yours, the debtors, and then they force you to use them in order to invest in themselves. And then they have a problem where they have to hold on to them because they might have a business model whereby a bank run can happen if everyone withdraws at the same time. And therefore, the debtor that's lost lots of trust, you only end up with a few customers that still believe in it versus the many that are really angry and want to move their coins over somewhere else. So once you've got that, you've got it in custody, you can then voluntarily withdraw them. And then you can invest voluntarily. So, if once you've got your coins, if you want to back a bidder, then that should be a voluntary investment. It should be, if you want to put some money into an ad hoc group in order to represent your special interest, then once you've got your coins in custody, you should be able to invest those funds or walk away as you choose. Or even if the company wants to reorganize, then you can invest in the reorganization of that, but don't allow the reorganization to force you to invest. Do it voluntarily so that those that want to invest can invest and those that don't want to invest can walk away. If I could do it all over again, I would have focused on this right from the beginning, but it took us this long to figure out how that works. Then, and only then, you can receive all of the securities, and there may be companies that go bankrupt. For example, if no one wants to invest in Celsius Mining, then it may need to go through its own Chapter 11 and sell off all its equipment, but at least it didn't force you to invest. However, if it needs 100 million, it can then say, well, I'll go out to the people and the coins that they own in custody and see if anyone wants to reinvest. If enough people want to reinvest, then we can revive that business and we can revive that company and security. But the key, what I'm fighting for right now, is to avoid involuntary investment. We don't want to be forced to invest, and that's why all the arguments happened. If we can set the game up whereby you can invest voluntarily, then we can just stop arguing, we can move over to what we want to move on to, and we can go through the process in a more free market way rather than being forced, because we might just want our Bitcoin back or our Ethereum back, and we don't want to reinvest into another company. Others would love to allocate all their funds over to another company. So in order to try and figure this out, if you're new to Chapter 11, I actually a while back put together, for example, because you can't release a formal plan because Celsius had exclusivity, I released some ideas and I put together about 7 video series. For those new to this, you can check it out, how I reverse engineered the processes and put together, if I were the debtor, what I would do as a recovery plan, and how I would do that throughout the bid process as well, and all of the 4 different processes. So you're free and welcome to check that out. If you want to go back to the archives, check out my video, my YouTube channel, Simon Dixon. You can see them where I break down all the different processes. They're going to be relevant to all the different Chapter 11s that are coming, but they all have a slightly different flavor. So with that in mind, we're building a lot of technology to really get this process efficient. At Banktothefuture, because we've been involved in so many of these different cases and investors in the industry, we put together a structure based upon really understanding the protection mechanisms for investor assets. So I just want to go through it briefly to help you understand how we can use the technology and the platform in order to get the maximum outcome. And I'll give you a quick demo of some of the things that we're doing as well. Basically, the way that our company works, Banktothefuture, because people had many questions, is we're an online investment platform, and our technology and our platform is a regulated securities business. We have that where it owns the technology and runs the platform. But if you're from the US, for example, then you onboard with both the regulated securities business, but also a local US broker-dealer that's deeply integrated into the platform. So you get the local regulations on top of the global regulations of our platform. But then once you actually engage in our platform, you can purchase, you can buy and sell securities. I'll give you a bit of a demo and how it relates to some of the features we're building to support you in these Chapter 11 processes. But those securities are held in custody separate from Banktothefuture. There's a separate company called Banktothefuture Capital. And all it does is it doesn't have any lawsuits or legal liabilities. All it does is one thing only. It segregates all of your investments and holds a register completely independent. So if Banktothefuture, the company, which we don't take on any debt, but if it did go bust, then Banktothefuture Capital, all your shares are segregated from Banktothefuture. No Chapter 11 can come after your assets. We can't claim that those assets are ours. And so therefore you have full segregation. The other thing we do is the same with crypto. So often, for example, when people invested in Bitfinex, they received hundreds of millions of dividends. Those were paid out in Tether. And you can convert them to Bitcoin through our service or however you want to use our platform. But the crypto is held in a segregated company as well, BF Virtual Assets. Fully segregated, so if anything goes wrong with Banktothefuture or anyone wants to sue us, they can't come after your crypto and your assets because it's fully segregated in a separate organization as well. And then finally, also we also offer portfolios where people can, for example, contribute every month, and X% of it goes into Bitcoin, X% goes into ETH, X% of it is staked, X% of it generates mining income or something, and the rest goes into a portfolio of shares, which we call our retirement plan B. But again, those are all segregated separately. So if anything happened to BF, your retirement plan is your own company, segregated in your own name, and belongs to you independent. So once you get this set up right, you have the ability to give people their coins so that you own them, when they want to hold them in custody, and then you can withdraw them to self-custody as you choose. Your security is segregated and your retirement plans all segregated with a mixture of both segregated crypto in custody and segregated securities. And so because we've been building that for over a decade now and all the compliance to allow it, I'd like to just give you a quick demo before we move over to Twitter Spaces that would take me probably another 5 minutes. And then I'm only going to be about 5 minutes late, hopefully, as well. If you want to join me on Twitter Spaces, then this is my Twitter handle, and I'm going to be starting it very shortly, just after the demo. So let's move over to the screen share. So let me make that full screen so you can see that. So here's my Banktothefuture account, and this feature is now live today. We're going to be developing a bit further. So once you've got your account, for example, here are my funds, and any funds held here, they're segregated in BF Virtual Assets, and at the moment, US aren't able to, but we're integrating with a full, a Federal Reserve registered bank in order to be able to do that in the case of the US. So you can come here, you can deposit funds, you can convert them, and those are held segregated through BF Virtual Assets. If you held any securities, then they would be in your portfolio. You can see your shares there, the different companies, download your share certificates, and those are segregated in Banktothefuture Capital SPC. Also, we've got this new thing here, which I'm going to do live with you right now. This is going to be more of a import your Chapter 11 claim. Now, at the moment, all you can do is manage all of your claims and all these different Chapter 11 processes in one place. This is phase 1 of the feature, and I'm going to be sharing with you a quick demo of what we're doing in phase 2. But this is my account, and I'm a creditor at Celsius. In the future, we'll be able to add, FTX here and any other companies, Voyager here. And essentially, it will match up through a smart process. So because I'm the only Simon Dixon probably on the creditor list, I won't need to provide additional proof or information. If there were 5 Simon Dixons on the creditor list, then I'd need to upload a screenshot of my Celsius account, and then we can match it up based upon your screenshot. But I'm going to press this button right now, and it's going to chew through the data. Immediately, it recognizes there's only one Simon Dixon as a creditor, and so I'm ready to go ahead. If you hadn't verified your account yet, it would ask you to verify and certify your account, so we have all the details in compliance with securities laws in case you decide to engage with either coins or securities. And now I can actually see here I've got my Celsius claim as well. So what it does here is it lists my Bitcoin, my Ethereum, my Tether, and any other things that we have here. And it also, if for example you were using it as collateral, then it wouldn't be available in your available balance because that's already backing a loan. We also haircut it by about 60% because we don't know what the end claim will actually be depending on the outcome of the bankruptcy proceeding. We don't allow you to utilize other coins other than Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stables for now, but in the future, as we build more features, we can allow you to exercise those claims in order to pull together and do interesting things. And so essentially, it gives you a way of when we're engaging at Banktothefuture through all those 4 different processes, whether it be the reorganization, working in order to fight for your securities to get them distributed to you, whether it's through the bid process, you could back a bidder that you want in order to win the bid, or whether you want to back for example, we're putting together different people that they don't want their coins, but they want more equity, and we can put them together in a different marketplace so that those that want more securities can trade with those that want more coins. And we're building out all these features so that you can have a collective voice, so that whenever a bidder is going through the process, or even a reorganization, you could say, well, I'd love to invest in Celsius mining, for example. So I'll pledge all of my Bitcoin over to Celsius mining. And obviously it's not binding until you've got all the full disclosures and all the full details. But you can indicate that you've got that so that when a bidder comes through, they can say, well, there's about 100 million of pledges that want to invest in this mining business. And there's a bunch of people that don't want to, so don't force them. And then we can, use the UCC and the UCC's process in order to get it through the different ways of doing it. Once we do this, we can make sure that we get the result that we want. And we can almost be like a union, and then you can go through the different phases. So, for example, initially you're just putting together your claim to give yourself a voice, and you can manage your claim. But in another part of the process, for example, GK8 is in auction, and GK8 may see, well, we need millions of investment before we can even sell the asset, or we can use that. And some might say, well, I don't want to be forced to invest. So they could go over, they could allocate some of their claim to GK8 as one of the companies in the Celsius bid. So, you got a little bit of details about it there, just like other things. Remember, this isn't a binding offer at this stage. This is you indicating how you would allocate your claim so you can't be forced to do things you don't want to do. You go over to the investor page, and then we've got, for example, here's how we can use this technology. You sign up with your different broker. This isn't an actual securities transaction, but later, if you wanted it to be binding, we could actually make that a securities transaction, and then you would have had your agreement with your local broker. If you're in the US, a US broker-dealer, you could say, I'd like to take $500 of my Bitcoin claim at this point, and I'd like to move it over there. And you can say, use some of my Bitcoin or my Ethereum, and I'd like to indicate that I'd be willing to invest $500 into Celsius mining, pull it all together, and then we can have, once that's phase 2. Now imagine you get through the bidding process because there's all this interest that's been allocated, and then you go to the next page, or it goes to a reorg, and they're looking for people to invest, and rather than being forced to invest and then sell our coins, they can say, well, we'd like to claim on that, so here we'll send you a term sheet. And then you can, once you've got those securities, you can hold them within your portfolio, and you can trade with other people. Maybe you don't want those securities anymore. You'd like to get some dollars for that. So you get your dollars, you put together in this bulletin board, we can match them up in compliance with securities laws. Now they're actual securities. Then you can also, once you've got your funds, you can remember they're all segregated in custody. And so you can go there and decide what to do with your funds. You might want to convert some of your dollars held in custody in order to purchase some Bitcoin. So you go over to the Bitcoin section, you manage, you decide that you want to buy some Bitcoin with those dollars, and maybe you want to reinvest in something else and do those shares. And essentially we can create a very efficient marketplace for managing all these processes as they go through the different phases. Phase one is just simply having a voice and managing all your claims in one place. The second phase is actually expressing an indication of interest, how you'd like those funds to be allocated. And then if it actually goes in the direction through the court, phase three is actually being able to have a marketplace with real securities where you can download your share certificates and match up with other people that maybe want to sell those equity or those debt instruments or whatever it may be. So we've already built, so right now, if you get an account on Banktothefuture, you will see this, go over to any of the sections here, and you will see already right now that you can import your Celsius claim. We do currently have a big waiting list for accounts on Banktothefuture. Because we comply with securities laws, we have to do manual checks, check suitability, and some of you had some questions around that that I'll take on the AMA shortly as well. We're building new features, for example, for those that may not be familiar with investing in securities and they didn't pass the test or they didn't have enough experience, where you can use some of your experience in cryptocurrency transactions to invest in different types of products. So we're doing a bit of a phased release because we're engaged in many of these processes that I talked about in chapter 11 as we speak. So I hope this gives you some new energy. Create your account, verify it, certify it on Banktothefuture. As I said, there is a waiting list at the moment, and we will be going through these processes. Everything that I'm seeing right now is indicating that there may be some delays on there, and there's many, many more processes as a result of Chapter 11 companies that are also, dependent upon each other, as we've had a bit of a cascading effect. All right, so that's going to do it for the screen share. So we're doing exactly what we've always done, which is working with the companies, understanding the problems, supporting our industry, putting investors first, putting creditors first, and building technology that allows people to engage in voluntary investment. Our battle right now is to ensure that any coins that are left are allocated back to you, back to me as a creditor for the 21st that I'm entitled to, and every other creditor that's entitled to those coins, held in custody using whatever process come next. At the moment, it's the bidding process, and we'll be working through those processes in the next phases. Excuse me. And so, yeah, we'll keep working through those processes and then ensuring that any securities are allocated to you. We'll fight till the end to make sure that those securities are allocated. And the big battle is to ensure that you own your own coins, you own your own securities. And if you want to invest those coins in any other equity or whatever it may be, you do that voluntarily because you think it's a good investment and you want to do that. And then we can engage in trade, and put together all these different unique circumstances as we go through this process. And we always use financial technology in order to put together free market solutions so that we can also abide by the court process as it progresses. So always remember, you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Many are going to get really hurt. Others are going to do really well, and we'll always build technology and fight for investors in order to say that they are on the right side of this change with their assets and their securities, no forced investment, voluntary investment, and we do it with peace, we do it with love, we do it with unity, rather than having to fight to force us into outcomes that we don't want. So I'm going to move over to Twitter Spaces right now and answer as many questions as I can. As always, peace